Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second part of the Armory. Let me get this. Yeah, screw it. Alright, let's begin. The girl couldn't remember the test when she woke up. Her mind was as blank as if a rag soaked in alcohol had rubbed away at the memories of what had happened. She looked over towards the outside of the wall, sniffled pathetically, and wiped her eyes as she realized where she was. Part of her considered begging, but she had more experience than many and knew that people typically did not give second chances. Dejected, she continued away from the fence. She wandered, as she had wandered before, through the thriving and ugly city. The people were as familiar as strangers, so she quickly began to look for food. Her stomach was growling, but today must have been a bad one. There was no food in the trash, and no one would even toss her bread to eat. At the end of the night, she curled up on the ground. She felt defeated, hungry, and tired. Tears of pain slid down her cheek as she allowed herself to sink into sleep for the night. She would try again the next day and the day after, but it all yielded much of the same, and she was becoming desperate. The hunger inside of her body was beginning to gnaw at her. She couldn't see straight anymore, and even her own youthful energy no longer showed itself in her steps. She stumbled along, more like a broken old man than a young child. Her cheeks were sunken, and she looked close to becoming a skeleton as she fell over, groaning, onto the floor. Her eyesight was fading, and she struggled to her feet again. She couldn't fall over, or she would never get anything to eat. The pain was agony. It did more than hurt. It sapped at her strength and even filled her mind. It was all-encompassing, and it was going to kill her. However, the desperation of wanting to survive was beginning to fail her. She had all but collapsed onto the floor when she finally saw something. Her eyes widened at a small loaf of bread discarded onto the side of the road. It was moldy, but the mold could be eaten around. She hurried over as fast as she could manage and grabbed at the bread, only to hear a sob of disappointment. Through her hazy vision, she saw a small boy, no older than her. He was looking at her with tears of hunger swimming in his eyes. He looked like he was just as hungry as her, and without thinking, she grinned at him and tore it in half. She held the larger half to him. "Here, I'm not hungry enough to eat it all," she lied easily. The boy blinked, surprised at the sudden gesture, and looked down at it. He swallowed and looked at her again, not sure what to do. When she nodded again, he smiled widely at her. His head nearly touched the ground as he bowed. "Thank you so much," said the boy softly. He raised his head, and in an instant he looked older, fuller, more alive. She blinked in shock as the now adult man continued, "You saved my life." And then the world exploded back into focus. The girl gasped in surprise as the feeling of hunger dissipated dramatically. The illusion was cast aside, and she found herself inside the fence of the armory. She cast her vision around, baffled as all of her memories came flying back to her like migrating birds. She blinked the vision away and found herself staring into the eyes of Ekai and the armorer. "You can stop now, little one. The danger is gone, and I am so sorry that we ever did that to you." She stared at him in disbelief. It had all seemed so real. She could remember, vividly, starving to near death. She could remember being cold, weak, desperate. She looked around again, convinced that the boy she had met would be hiding behind some structure. The armorer watched her, remorse etched into his features. His head bowed slightly. He whispered softly, "The test is over. The last test we ever issue is a test of kindness. We need to make sure your need to protect is stronger than your need for self-preservation. The world does not need any more cruel heroes. It was only a horrible lie, and we are sorry." The small girl watched them. Then, as she realized there had never been any real danger, her eyes grew damp. She pressed her face in Ekai's shoulder exhausted emotionally and physically. She sobbed as the horrible pressure the tests had placed upon her subsided. She cried for many minutes, and Ekai held her, his gentleness belaying the dreadful power he was known for. He closed his eyes and sighed sadly, not moving until the girl finally cried herself into a deep sleep, too exhausted to even move. He slowly rose, carrying her in his arms, and looked at the armorer. She passed. He nodded sadly. She passed. She is an apprentice of the Armory. You shall let the others know. First, we must allow her to regain her strength. She is terribly malnourished. Once that has been seen to, then we will begin to train her. We will have to teach her to read and write. Of that I have no doubt, but she seems intelligent. She will be a fast learner. We will allow her 1 week to recover and to learn, and after that physical training shall begin. Ekai nodded. I believe that is ideal as well, though before then, we should teach her to control her power. He glanced towards her. Her body is ready to fight. She immediately attacked us as soon as she realized we were throwing her into an illusion, though I don't think she was consciously aware of it. He gazed down at deep tears in his armor. She is extremely dangerous, to such an extent that she is afraid of herself. The armorer nodded. That would probably be best. She was lucky it was us here. I can see now why she's scared of her powers. She must have lost control before, and was likely driven out of wherever she was from. I think she is a long way from home, or maybe because of her powers, she has never had a home at all. Either way, it's our duty to raise her now. The armorer nodded and smiled softly. I'd thought of a name for her, by the way. Would you like to hear? When Ekai nodded, he touched the girl's head and looked up at the moon that appeared in the sky. Luna. Ekai smiled softly. Luna? I think that name is perfect. She will have dark days, as does everyone, but she will shine high above all others. His teacher nodded and smiled. Indeed. Now take her to her new room. Tomorrow we will begin her education. If she is half as bright as she seems, and even a quarter as determined, then I'm sure she will truly blossom as we get started. Ekai agreed and left. Indeed, Luna, as she was to be known from then on, turned out to be an amazing student. She had been 6 when she joined the Armory as an apprentice. A lively young girl, scarred from a life of constant poverty and fear, she blossomed under the tutelage of the other member. Although it was clear that Ekai was her favorite teacher, he sat with her for hours, explaining in a soft, calm, even voice about the elements, nature, and her own powers. He also taught her math and letters, teaching her to read and write as well as to count. He would stay with her all day, never growing impatient or raising his voice in anger. Not that he had many reasons to. Luna adored Ekai and was usually the perfect student around him. She became bored occasionally. Of course, she was a child after all. And when that would happen, Ekai would challenge her to a game designed to make her use her powers in some new way. He usually won whatever game or contest he challenged her to. Of course, he was a grandmaster to many of the crafts he taught her. Still, though, she enjoyed them and laughed every time she got closer and closer to beating him. And it was thus that in less than 2 years' time, Ekai and the rest of the Armory managed to rein in her powers, allowing her, for the first time, to gain complete and utter control of the monstrous amount of energy within her at just age 8. After learning how to control her power and bringing her back from her horribly underfed state, combat training began. Knowing Ekai's fondness for her, a different member of the group stepped forward to teach her. A man named Sanson was also known as the Shield Wall. A monster of a man, 2 meters tall and all muscle, Samson taught her to be as unmovable as a mountain and how to unleash all of her energy at once to deal devastating blows. He was rougher with her than Ekai. He was strict, but he was fair, and he didn't hurt her. Whenever she would make a mistake, he was there to employ his craft. A small rap on the forehead or push was all it took, and their small match was over. Over their time together, he turned the little girl into a skillful warrior, practicing every day, smoothing every kink over until she could fight a person more than twice her age and size and win easily, with or without the use of any weapons or magic. It took her 2.5 years to go to a level that Samson called competent, which of course meant that to the rest of the world, she was a human weapon capable of taking down a small fortress. She was 11 now and had grown in size. She stayed tiny, almost minuscule when compared against the larger-than-life members of the Armory, but her mind was expanding rapidly. She had dropped her uneducated years behind her and had begun to run forward. Her powers were also expanding at a remarkable level, and it was clear that already at the age of 11, while she may never have the unstoppable physical strength of Samson or the Armorer, nor the experience of even the newest member of the Armory, she was about to outstrip them all in sheer magical power. This was when Sky took the young Luna under her wing. The spear of the Armory was a tall, intimidating blonde woman. She taught her about the world, taught her to truly harness the powers within her, not just to unleash it, but to shape it to her bidding, to bring objects to her and to throw them away, to create a weapon with nothing but her mind, to impose restrictions upon the spells that she cast to increase their effectiveness. Continuing upon Ekai's and Samson's training, she made her use her magic in new ways, her sharp eyes always watching. She taught Luna how to drive forward with all her might, to use her abilities' unique reach and versatility to keep an enemy at bay. She taught her to be accurate until she could hit any target she wanted from any distance, and she showed her the value of constant practice, not until she got it right, but until it became impossible for her to get it wrong. All of this Sky taught her in 1.5 years. By then, Luna had turned 12. They celebrated her birthday in the 6 years she had been with them. They were all immensely proud, and they all loved the girl. They spent the entire night laughing and smiling. Even the Armorer, who was not one for celebrations, came down from his spot of prayer to join them. He congratulated the young girl on her progress, and she beamed happily. She had been transformed at this point, not into a killing machine, not into a warrior, but into a protector, a guardian. The members surrounding her could not have been more proud. The day had to end, however, and it was training as usual. Next came the twins, Ursa, the sword, and Helia, the dagger. They taught her speed. The two were unbelievably fast, and they taught her to move like the wind, to not just run, but almost to fly. The two could move so fast they appeared a blur, and often Luna could not keep up. She learned, though, that she did not have their superhuman abilities and powers, but she had her magic, and she began to use that to augment herself. She would send precise boosts of magic into her legs to move at an alarming speed until she could almost keep up with them. She would boost her eyes to keep up with the blurring environment, and her ligaments and bones to brace against the speed. They then taught her to attack while running, to constantly move, no matter what, never to stop, lest the enemy came from behind and took her while she rested. They built in her a stamina to fight for hours without rest, and the importance of constant movement became ingrained within her. Then suddenly, it slowed down. After all the running and sprinting and moving, they stopped. They began next to teach her patience. They tried to ingrain in her a sense of waiting and watching. A need to analyze every detail was forced into a mind that wasn't compatible with it. She struggled. She was active and wily, and the thought of sitting and watching for hours was next to impossible. She had trouble meditating, and she was constantly fidgeting. She couldn't keep her mind focused, and it took a long time to learn the value of silence and stillness. It was resolved one day when Ekai sat in front of her and closed his eyes. Do not move. Do not even think. Just feel. Feel the earth, the magic inside you, your emotions. Stop trying so hard to think. The purpose of this is to teach you not to do anything. It is taught like this so that you can learn to do everything while simultaneously doing nothing. It is to learn to plan 50 moves ahead. You should be able to glance at a field and know exactly where to go and how to get there after this, and how to sit down and think about every single individual course of action available to you. But to do that, you need to learn to sit still and to have patience. Understood? She nodded, a bit shamefaced, and from then onward she truly poured her being into meditation. She stopped moving around, she stopped thinking, she just extended her hand to touch the magic inside her, focusing on nothing but that and of how to utilize it. Slowly, for she still struggled at times, she adapted. She learned patience, and finally the twins too deemed her competent. It took her 4 years to learn the skills they taught her, and she had matured into a pretty 16-year-old girl. She never lost her small size, and likely never would, but she made up with that with unbelievable magical ability, ingenuity, and an ability to adapt to any situation. And finally, it was the armorer himself who stepped forward. He sat in front of her, silent for many seconds, his eyes closed, as usual, and they sat together in silence until he finally spoke. I'm going to teach you how to see, and how to overcome anything that might get in your way. She jumped a bit and looked at him, the silence suddenly broken. To see? You mean like you do? She leaned forward, her curiosity aroused. Yes, like I do. But this will be unlike anything you have ever done thus far. You will use no magic, for I need no magic to see, and such an ability can one day be stolen from you. You will not use your eyes, because to see like me, you must be accustomed to darkness. You will not use any strength or speed you may have received. You won't use a single one of your senses in case they are taken from you one day. The only thing you will use to see is your aura. That is your very soul. Her eyes widened. Is that even possible? Of course it is. It is how I see the world, after all. It is extremely difficult. It took me 9 years on my own to learn how to do this. But you are not alone. You have 6 trusted teachers and mentors that I have trained as well, and you have me. It will take a long time to be sure, but that should not discourage you. You have trained with us for 8 years already, and at the end of this training, when I deem it, you shall be made a full member of the Armory. Her eyes lit up. She leaned forward. Really? He nodded. You have proven yourself in all other areas. Do this, and you shall be one of us. She grinned, and her natural impatience began to show, despite her hard training. When do we begin? He stood up. Immediately. And that's where I'm going to end it. My neck really hurts. And I have a sore throat. So, I hope you all enjoyed that part. I messed up a couple of times, but I don't think it was really bad enough for me to warrant starting the whole freaking thing over. Now that these videos are starting to get a little bit longer, I'm going to pick and choose what's bad and what's not. Because, well, I've already restarted this video like 3 times. Gets annoying after a while. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Goodbye.